Okay, cool. Welcome everyone to 2023. I hope everyone's holiday was good, and hopefully you have some cool stuff going on this year. Today, in lieu of meeting in person at OU Health, they had some scheduling things come up, and it didn't make sense for them to host anymore. So hopefully we see them return later this year. But I'm going to give this talk that I've delivered a couple of times, but I call it chalkboards, whiteboards, dashboards. So out the gates here, I'm going to go through some intros and announcements. We're going to talk about using digital whiteboards in dashboarding projects and then have open Q&A at the end. I don't know that we'll take the whole time. I talk pretty fast, and this is my first one in a while, so I'm probably going to be real nervous and shaky the whole time. Here's your lineup of fearless leaders for the year. Sean Spencer, analyst consultant. Kristen Ring, she has taken the day out. She is sick today. Otherwise, she'd be here to introduce herself. But Kent and Matt, do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
Hey, I'm Kent Sloan. You probably see me around the tug now and then. Happy to answer questions, but over to Sean for this one.
I'm Matt Wellborn. I work at OU Health on the supply chain team. I do a lot of work in Tableau and SQL.
I should have told you guys that I was going to ask you to do that earlier. So I'm sorry that I sprung that on you just now. But Matt and Kent will be watching the chat for me while I'm talking endlessly, answering questions, and looking out if you guys need to raise your hand. And they can interrupt me if you're not feeling brave enough. So what's the plan for today? It's been a while since I've seen everyone, so I'm going to take a little bit longer of a time to introduce myself and give you guys a little bit more detail on who I am and what I've been up to. Then we're going to dive in how I approach a dashboarding project with a client, and then we're going to do like a live example at the end of how I actually use the tool and go through an exercise of what that might look like, and then we'll have an open Q&A session at the end. Things to think about would be, do you want to host the user group? I think everyone really enjoyed going to the Thunder. And of course, they have like that super cool arena, and we're able to give out all kinds of things signed by players. But that doesn't mean that your business is any less cool. We would love to come and visit the various places that you guys work at and get an insight into how you're using Tableau and the success that you guys are having with your various tech stacks. So let me know if you think that your org might be open to hosting. I always like to share open office hours. I get emails from time to time from people from the user group. Happy to hop on a call for an hour or two, or if it takes multiple calls throughout multiple weeks to just check in and share progress. Maybe you're struggling with a particular issue, or you just need help coming up with like a silly or tricky way to get a visualization to do something. Love helping with those things. The other thing is we need presenters for our May talk. So if you have a dashboard that you have made that you like, or you have a calculation that you found to be interesting or otherwise useful for your organization, that might be truly unique. If you are willing to, put yourself out there and talk to the group and show off what you've been doing or what your org has been doing, we can definitely arrange some sort of swag exchange. Outside of that, we have some dates to look forward to. And is Kelly still hanging around on the call? Maybe not. That's fine. Kent might know the answer to this. Do we have dates for the Tableau conference yet?
We do. Let me pull those up so I don't guess them wrong, but they're in May.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we've got 4 events planned for you guys for later this year. March, we're going to talk about dynamic zones, which is a new feature in 2024. We're going to talk then the May show and tell. Kent will do his annual new features talk in September, and then November was actually supposed to be this talk, but we moved it forward with the change of plans. And you said May for Tableau conference?
May 9th through 11th, and it was also posted in the chat and a link out to the conference.
Perfect. And that's in Vegas this year, right?
Yes.
Cool. It was in Vegas last year?
Yeah. Vegas is an easy place to host conferences. They used to alternate 1 year in Vegas, 1 year somewhere else, but COVID wrecks plans. So Vegas is the default for conferences.
Makes sense. Okay. Yeah, so let's a little bit more about me. You guys see me on here a lot, and some of you are new or some of you have been around, but I just wanted to take some time to give you guys a little bit more insight into me and what I do. So I am an analytics consultant at Interworks. Largely what this means is that I go from client to client, making recommendations in the Tableau space and data space. And sometimes I build net new things. Sometimes I build things that are breaking. And sometimes I just help maintain a regular schedule for a client. I have a pretty good time at work. I like Interworks a lot. It's a great place to hang out. Kent is my boss, and we go get a lot of coffee together. Where I've been, I grew up largely in the Southwest, so I call myself part desert lizard because I spent most of my time in Nevada and what do you call New Mexico. For college, I went to Oklahoma City University, small private liberal arts, where I studied finance and economics alongside a bunch of theater majors. And then for a short period, my dad and I had a restaurant, and we lost like $12,000 and decided to close it just a couple of months before COVID happened. So it was actually pretty fortuitous for us. And I have a 3-year-old daughter. Those are the things that really consume most of my time. And I've got another one on the way. So in May, towards the end of May, we should have another daughter joining the family, which will be a lot of fun. As far as my career, I got out the gates in e-commerce at a company here in downtown Oklahoma City that sells gold and silver bars on the internet. I spent 4 years there, where I experienced like the very deep vertical of organizations, where I started essentially in the basement packing orders and moved into accounting. And then from accounting, moved over into business intelligence. And so I got a great big picture on how the entire ecosystem works there. And it really built this foundation for me moving forward in my career. And I actually went back to Oklahoma City University for my next gig, which was a director of business intelligence. So it was kind of cool to get to go back to the place where I did my undergrad and kind of give back to that community in a way that made a lot of sense, trying to forward their efforts in the data analytics realms. We did some pretty cool stuff there, analyzing the how you target students for attrition mitigation, right? So like, how is it that you measure whether or not you assign resources back to students to help them succeed, or who's going to leave or otherwise. So that was a lot of fun. But I decided that universities were not for me. It is a very interesting political environment. For anyone who has worked at a university, you'll know what I'm talking about. And so, yeah, we were a client of Interworks. At the time, Matt Hughes had come to my office and talked to me, and we met, and I loved everything that he was saying, and his vision made a lot of sense. And I said, you know what, why don't I just come over there? And I've been here for 3 years, and I have no plans of leaving. Things that I like to be really involved with would be the Oklahoma City Homeless Alliance. So sometimes I will spend a couple of hours working on data visualizations for them, helping them come up with interesting ways to tell the story of homelessness using their data. And the Oklahoma Regional Food Bank is something that I really like. If you haven't gone to volunteer there, it's a great time. They turn on the speakers, you're put into an assembly line, it's fast paced, and you do a lot of good for a lot of people who are otherwise, unable to access calories when they need them. As far as my interests go, I'm pretty simple. I'm a huge dork, so I love Dungeons and Dragons. I've played World of Warcraft since I was like 14 years old. I've recently gotten into Formula One, which has been a great time. Previously, never loved sports. Formula One, though, very dramatic, very cool. And my COVID project was to watch all of the X-Files, and I did that every episode. And I still love it. I've started rewatching it. That's pretty much it about me. I'm gonna take a quick break to drink some water, and I'll check the chat real quick. Oh man, before I just keep rambling. But this is what you all signed up for. Okay, so with that, we'll dive into the content for the day. So dashboarding, whiteboards, chalkboards, and sometimes napkins. So when we think about dashboarding, I want to talk about the process that we mildly formalized here at Interworks, and something that I think rolls forward out into the public quite nicely, which are kind of breaking the ideas of a dashboarding project for something net new, or even to improve or repair, into some stages. And so the first step here on the far left is whenever I am assigned to a new client and they say, hey, Sean, get in there. The first thing that we want to do is try to understand. So, I'm going to go in, I have a list of questions that I ask a lot of questions. I ask if there's any documents that they have, any documentation on who this is for, what it does, what it connects to, what the audience might be. And I also like to meet people. So if there is a stakeholder who is leading the discussion, like a project manager, I'd love to meet them. And then I also usually ask that person if I can meet some of the consumers or the users that are going to be using it. And I ask them about their experience with the product so far, or what they would see changed, because their input and buy-in can pay off huge later. And the next step, we define that further. So we come back with additional questions, and then we start asking for tangible things like data tables, access, and kind of suggest an architecture for aggregation. Maybe what you're doing isn't deep enough. Maybe I need more records than less, or maybe I need less records than more. That's where we have these discussions. And all that to say, these two things happen before I ever even open the Tableau software. And the define stage is also where today's activity is going to be happening, which is coming up with a vision for what content should be on the page before we start working. Sometimes it makes sense to dive into Tableau early if the data set is small and the requests are limited. But a lot of the times what I find is there's, outside of just the data, there's functionality that needs to be discussed. There's buttons that need to do things, actions that need to trigger responses in the dashboard to make this thing feel like it's living and breathing. And so defining those before you start building can save you a lot of time in the later steps, right? So after you define it, you move to develop. And so where you can get stuck is if you don't complete the define stage well enough, after your development, you're going to get stuck in this cycle of refinement where you're optimizing and changing for user feedback. And ideally, where you want to go is away from define and over to support, where the only things that could happen to your creation now are your data sources break, which would not be anything that is in your control, or the data source just needs to be replaced. Questions about this idea? Does anyone feel like I'm missing a step? Maybe there's something that you do that isn't here. No, that's fine. If you think of something, post it in the chat. So on the idea of tools of the trade, how do we go through this defined process? My favorite in the past, when we would meet in person, so my job used to involve travel, and I would go to client sites and have discussions with people in person, but that doesn't happen so much anymore. So I had to find an alternative. But napkins are arguably the best, right? Because they're small, they're square, and they can be recycled. All really great things. When napkins are not available, chalkboards are always great too, right? I can put something up in your office on your wall, but they are screechy, they're dusty, and chalk is meant to be outside, not indoors. And then there's whiteboards, lots of colored markers, easy to see. Digital whiteboards though, superior almost every way. This is a permanent online record that you can't delete if you wanted to because I own it. It can be collaborative, so I can invite people to this tool. And the other great thing is that you can copy paste into it, right? So you can grab all kinds of images and put them in there, and grab inspiration from other things and talk about, does it make sense to move this thing into or with the others that we're working on? Hold on, we got a question real quick. Okay, great question. So Kindle has submitted, do you ever have issues with the data not being good enough quality to work with? All the time. That is super regular. Fortunately, we position ourselves in client engagements where data ownership isn't always on us. So if I go to a client and the thing that they want to build doesn't match their data architecture of what they have, then we suggest to them what it should look like to meet the goals that they have. And if they want help with that, we have a team of data engineers that we can deploy to get that done. Or we would ask them to do it themselves, right? Unless it's like simple things. But a lot of the times it's going to require access and technical know-how of rewriting specific queries from their data sources. Moving back to the tools of the trade, though, the three popular tools that I see used the most would be Miro, InVision, and Figma. These are all largely this, more or less exactly the same. I think Miro is integrated with the Microsoft suite, though. It's been a while since I've used it. But yeah, they're just an online whiteboard space. Yeah, Zach's a big fan of Miro, of a place that a lot of people can come in and get out a marker and start drawing. We actually use it so I actually use it to play Dungeons and Dragons with my friends online. It's kind of cool because I can just snip in a picture of what my character might look like, put them on the board. It's already gridded, and we can move them around and pretend like we're in some sort of fantasy world. Oh no, I'm skipping slides. Okay, so why do I like this tool? Why do I like these digital napkins? The first point would be relationship building. So getting someone to agree on a napkin, I think, is a great first tangible victory. Something that you guys have done together and you can hand them and say, this is the thing that we want to do. And I think that just feels really good for building trust. The other thing that I like about napkins is that they're low effort. It's pretty easy to get out a marker and draw something. They're low resolution, and they temper expectations, right? So if I give you a marker, you can't build out the gates something that might be the most magnificent piece of engineered software ever created. It would be, it keeps it simple, right? So this keeps us efficient. It keeps us moving towards the objectives that you want without getting too distracted by having all of these powerful objects and interesting features being able to be drawn on the page. And again, just like this process of using the dash or the digital whiteboards removes technical debt from the develop, support, and refine stages, like we talked about earlier. It saves you a lot of time down the road when you're able to jot these ideas down, make plans in advance, and temper expectations. Okay, so moving forward into our example stage. So this is a dashboard that was actually given to me by a client. I'm not going to tell you who, and I have anonymized the data on the page. But they gave me this dashboard, and they said, Sean, the project objective here is to make this dashboard better. We know that it's not good, but we don't know how to formalize how, and our users are frustrated. Can you please improve this? And so I said, yeah, of course. And so I'm going to go ahead and pivot my screen share to my desktop, and we can talk about how this actually works. Can you guys see my my Figma board? Cool. So here we are in the tool. So this is Figma. And down here at the bottom of the screen, I've got my select tool, my hand tool. I've got a marker. I can do some shapes, triangles, squares, circles, various colors. I can throw down some sticky notes. I can create text, draw lines, make sections, and they even have fun little stamps. But what I did was I copied and pasted it. I copied and pasted in this image of the dashboard. And I wrote down some questions that I asked them. And so I asked the client, I said, hey, what's the most important thing on this page for your users, right? So standard psychology behind dashboards is that you only have a couple of seconds to impart information on someone that they're actually going to remember. What is it that you want them to walk away with? And they told me, and I came in here with my highlighter, and they said, it's really these response rates that we care about the most. We want the users to walk away knowing that what these response rates were for the specific question that was asked. And I said, okay, that's great. What is the second most important thing that your users take away from this dashboard? And they said, well, it's really the distribution of these different customer segments and how they answered the questions. So on this dashboard, for additional context, what we're looking at here is a question. I should change the color of my marker. A question is sent out to customers, and it was sent to 1 million people, and 600,000 of them responded. And these are their customer segments, and they want to know how these people are responding, and they said that's the second most important thing. And then I asked them, what type of filters and actions need to exist on this dashboard to make it better for you? And they handed over to me a list of filters. Of course, they could have asked for things like, when you click on a bar, we want you to go to a different view, or we want something to expand to show additional information. A common request that we'll get in dashboarding, right, is drilling down. I want to drill down. I want to see more information about the specific point. And so we'll discuss that and like what that journey looks like in creating like this user experience. But for them, they said, I said, what filters and actions need to exist? No actions needed to exist, which was great news for me. They just needed a handful of additional filters. And I said, okay, cool. So what I did was I went and grabbed a section. I threw it out here in the rough shape of what a dashboard might look like. And I said, okay, so, I know a little bit about questions and surveys. And I see that we have these unique views and there's responses leading up to a response rate. And these are the same metric. So what if we arranged things in a way that we threw the number, because it's the most important, really large on the screen? And since these are the important ones, why don't we make them red? It's a nice blue. And we can throw in some text for a label on them. That's small. And then we can fill in those things that are meant to add up to those response rates underneath them. So what do we have, like 600? And those numbers are kind of large, so maybe we shorten them, 600K. And was it 1,000K? And these other ones are 300 and 600. Are these large? Try not to spend too much time trying to organize these things to the grid, so you guys aren't just so incredibly bored watching me move squares of numbers around. But this is, this is kind of what the process would look like. All right, so then we'll just grab this generic label and paste it all around. And then there's two more metrics about respondents, and we'll just grab these two as placeholders. Put them down here. All right, and so pretty quickly, we can use Figma to align these objects, get them looking like they are orderly. And so you might throw dashboard title here, make it huge. A good thing to do with dashboards is to add a little bit of detail. So like something about the date range is typical that you would put so that people understand what they're looking at as some subtext underneath the dashboard title, right? So I have like these dates here. Sometimes another thing that you would put underneath the dashboard title is like current filters that are not default. All right, and so then the second thing that they said was most important that people take away would be the distributions of these various customer segments. And what they chose to do was use a lot of pie graphs, which is a big signal to me that someone that works there lost their mind at some point. But that's okay, because we can help them find it. All they really needed, so the big downfall here, right, is these pie graphs make it difficult to compare segments against each other. Fortunately for like when I, anonymized all of this data, all of them were 2575, but you can have various spreads and it's going to be a little bit more difficult to tell what's going on. So we can go over here and we can grab a shape tool. And we can shape these into some bars. And we'll throw a title over here that's like response by segment. And we'll just throw those out there and I can, how many segments are there? 54, 5, 6, 7, 8. I need 2 more. Then I can align these and then I can space them. So yeah, maybe we would have just a bar chart that shows what that is. And then they had the response percent by segment. Oh, well, these are supposed to be yes, no. So let's do that really quick. Actually. You can tell I'm really good at this by how slowly I drag the cubes. All right, so there's something that looks like it's a little bit more telling. And The next section is the percent response by segment. So this isn't a percent of total, but instead just a flat percentage. And so these would just be more or less the same, but of varying heights as your segments all answer differently. So these are their actual responses. And then the last thing that they had on here was the response by time. And I think that they were probably on the right track with a type of line chart here. So I'm not going to deviate and keep something that I think that they liked. And we'll just draw a little blue line. Oh, whoops. We'll just grab the wall here, bring this in. And we know that there were supposed to be some filters on here. And one of the things that I like to do is Tableau has that little hamburger that you can make to hide the filters. And so I would just make a little note. I put the hamburger here and I'd say, filters are in here. Lately, I've been getting a little artistic, and I've been swapping this out for an eyeball that like is open and closed, and it winks at you. It's kind of fun, but that's neither here nor there. So like pretty quickly as a group, we all just spent about 10 minutes together taking this information. We asked a couple of questions. We took the information out. We used some light color. I probably used too much color over here. So if we were going to go back and actually scrutinize this, these would all be probably not blue. I'd probably make them gray. And then we could make the segments all the appropriate color to match their categories. Yeah, so it might look something more like this. See, there's a couple of things. So this is what I took back to the client, more or less. I drew this up. I said, hey, I listened to what you guys had to say. I talked to some people that worked amongst you, and I think that this type of design, a user's going to come in, they're going to see the response rate that they care about. It's going to be big. It's going to be red. I might bold it. And they're going to walk away with knowing the number that they wanted to know really quickly. And then the secondary stuff is so much easier to read because we've designed these histograms in a way that allow a user to quickly compare groups against each other to see how one segment is performing versus another. Bars just make more sense to read than pies. And they love this, and this is what we ended up building for them. Would any of you have done something maybe differently? I guess is how I should have opened this. I should have asked what you guys would do out the gates. It's a little easier for me because I knew what the answer was, right? Because I did the exercise and I worked with this client, I knew what the outcome was, and this is exactly what it looked like that we built.
John, what would this process, or how would it be different if you were working from just a data set instead of a dashboard that's already created?
Yeah, that's a good question. These questions remain the same, right? But we honestly just, the only thing that would be different is that we have nowhere to start from. And so what becomes difficult when you don't have something that you're starting? So like in this case, I was taking something that existed and making it better. In the case that you're making something net new, how this exercise would be different is that I would be creating multiple versions, right? So I would grab this whole section. I would duplicate it. And I would do it again. And maybe what that looks like is moving this out, moving these over. Maybe it's deleting this. Putting these side by side. And arranging the dashboard in this type of way. Just a different visual representation. Maybe you put in bars to separate objects. And then I think it's really important that when you're building something that new, honestly, and even when you're improving a dashboard that exists already, coming back to the client with multiple examples of ways that you would arrange the information can also give them a greater feeling of investment into the project, right? Because they feel like, oh, I've come with all of these choices. And sometimes in those meetings, what we end up doing is making a third option that I never came up with, where we piecemeal together things from the views. Maybe they really like the format of this dashboard. But what they really liked the most was the separation that I created using those lines. And so they would say, can we continue to do that in this dashboard where you separate the objects? And so in that way, we've collaborated and come up with a plan to help make the dashboard more their own. It's a good question, though. Thanks, Matt. Do you feel like I answered it, or do you feel like I dodged it?
No, I think you answered it.
Okay, cool. Oh man. So yeah, we're coming up on, just 5 minutes early. Ken says, I start with what metrics are, I start with what are the metrics we need to see in the dashboard. Then what are some ways that we want to split up this metric, date, region, category? That could be that's a good call out, right? So sometimes your client thinks that there's a level of aggregation that they want. And as the developer, I would challenge all of you to be brave and show them something that they didn't ask for. Obviously, like what we did here in our redesign is pretty safe. But if I'm in there exploring this data, and to Ken's point, I see something like, region, maybe I go ahead and in my dashboard planning here that I'm going to show to the client, I go ahead and build a view that's split by region, even though they didn't ask for it, and just see if that's interesting to them. And sometimes, you'll have big success, and you'll show them something that they didn't know the tool was capable of. They may have not even known that was in the data source, and they might like that a whole lot more. See, Michael Lane asks, concern with floating text boxes is they always don't line up on the client's computer. What do you recommend for layout differences? Yeah, so I love floating objects. The client that I have, yeah, Kent hates them.
Containers all the way.
Yeah. I float containers everywhere. And that's largely because the client that I work with, we engage with our design team, and we often import like a more or less a piece of artwork to be the background of our dashboard, which is a ton of fun. And I'm kind of in that way forced to float containers over the top of a stylized art. And yeah, it's a process where you line everything up to the best of your ability, and then you publish it to the server and you see what it looks like. I would encourage everyone in Tableau to, like, when you're building a dashboard, fix the size. Do not use the dynamic, the automatic, or sometimes you can do the range, but I would almost always say just go for a fixed size. My default is like a nice, comfortable, like 12 by 9. This is going to look good on most screens and give you plenty of room. If you feel like, now, and again, it just depends on what you're building. Sometimes you build stuff that's really long formatted, so like tall. I wouldn't go much wider than this ever, though. I wouldn't build wide dashboards. I'd build tall dashboards, so you scroll down. I felt like I had something else to add to that idea. I'm not quite sure. Maybe I'll remember. Yeah, Craig says PowerPoint 16 by 9. Yeah, if you find yourself going outside of this size regularly, perhaps your content needs to live on 2 different dashboards, and you can build a navigation button between them. Yeah, Matthew has a good point, right? So like, fortunately for him, he knows the common laptop size at his company. And so he can design around that. And I'll tell you this too, like, even from computer to computer on desktop, when you open up a Tableau workbook, depending on how your machine is rescaling and rendering the placement of objects, they can be in different places on my screen versus your screen, which is super frustrating. One of the things that I constantly am sharing with people is this blog post from one of my coworkers. I think I have it in my pin on my booked. Yeah, scaling Tableau dashboards. I'll throw this out in the chat. So one of my coworkers, Debbie, made this post, and you have to do it for every new install of Tableau, but I find that it works really well for those of us who use high-res monitors. There's a few steps here. You download a file and you make an edit in your Windows registry. But what it'll do is if you've ever had this issue where you open Tableau and you go to like right-click on one of the fields in a sheet to get this menu, and that menu doesn't pop up right here. Maybe it like pops up in the corner of your screen, or maybe it doesn't even load at all, or you have to click on it multiple times. This typically solves that issue. Okay.
Sean, like in light of one, I did this and it's awesome. It's awesome. It's great. It saved me hours of publishing back and forth on our server and checking sizing issues. Secondly, regarding the design and sizing, I think it is helpful to note whether it's monitors or maybe they're putting, maybe, you don't know where your client is or your users are going to be consuming the dashboard. So there may be good reason. Let's say it's on a TV screen in their break room. Knowing what the final delivery vehicle is helps you be able to design for that, because maybe on a TV screen there's no way to interact with it, as opposed to I don't know, like a tablet or a computer where there is interaction available. So those types of things can, knowing what the final medium or audience or context is for the dashboard is helpful.
So, I ask that question often, but sometimes it really just falls into this question about what filters or actions needs to exist. And that's often where you'll learn what this is, right? And they're going to say, oh, I don't want it to be clickable at all because it's going into a PowerPoint, or it's going to be on the TV in the break room. And so we need to design this for like all of this information that I've told you is important. So like the information, the first thing and the second thing that I want people to walk away with can't be hidden inside of a tooltip or be subtext on some kind of action or be triggered by a click, because people just won't have access to do that in a in a tangible printed page. But that's a great call out. That is largely the entirety of my talk today. I hope that you guys are maybe next time that you think about designing a new dashboard or fixing one with one of your friends, you would think about Figma. It is free to use, so I think that's the best news that I could share with you, right? And so it's just figma.com. This specific segment of the tool that we're using is show the eyeball thing. I wonder if I have that saved to this machine. You see? One of these things is something. Out of here. No, I just want a shape. Okay, no, I don't have it saved to my shapes files. But it's pretty good. So I have one image that's like an open eyeball, and then I have one that's like a closed eye. It doesn't look like any of that. My drawing's very bad. But yeah, so when you click it, it's open, and when you close it, it's closed. So it's kind of fun. Oh, and to be clear, we are onto the Q&A section, so I'm loving all the posts in here. But also, if you guys want to, open up so I don't have to read, that'd be cool too. How would you work in a glossary or clarification of terms? Today, I had a project with two distinct terms that are sometimes used interchangeably, naming different things. Yeah. So along with my eyeball icon, I also have like this fancy cursive eye, not an eyeball, but the letter I inside of a circle. And I make that gray, and I can make that a solid thing, and then I can shrink it down. And so then you have like this little info icon. And so if you have two terms that are like real similar but kind of different, you can put like that info icon next to the terms. Or sometimes I'll put it up here next to the filter expander. So like we'll have a little info icon. And then another one that I'll typically put in is like this little download smiley face. It kind of looks like a nose with a smile. And then I don't know how into URL actions you guys are, but you can write a URL action for this button so that when you click it, it kicks off an event on your server that will trigger a download of a sheet that I typically hide is like a 1 pixel by 1 pixel in the top corner of the screen. Why isn't my pen working? Oh, it's because that's the zoom pen. Yeah, I'll hide like a 1 pixel by 1 pixel download sheet in the top left corner. And so when people trigger that download, it'll target this sheet, and they'll just get an Excel output of the stuff that's on the page. Oh, sure. So you want to see how do you add like an info button to a dashboard? Sure. So I can do that. We'll just use one of these random shapes in here as our info icon. It doesn't have to be an eye. We'll use this X. Okay, so I've made this sheet and it has this shape on it, and I'm going to make the size real big. I think it needs to go up here. Maybe. Oh gosh, now I'm embarrassed. Now I don't know how it works. I swear I do this all the time. Oh gosh, there it goes. It just rendered in. I think my workbook's just real slow. Okay, so we've got this X. We don't need that. But when I hover over it, I do get that tooltip. So then I can come in here and I can edit this tooltip and I can say something. Turn off those command buttons. And then when I go to my dashboard, I can grab my sheet. And you can see my screen like scaling this 12:9 down to like only a quarter of the page, which is quite funny. So maybe here's my data table, and then I can just grab this info icon and do what everyone hates. And I can just float it out here. And I can hide the title and get rid of this legend. And then we can shrink this down. And if it was an eye or like an info icon, when people moused over it, they would see that text. You can do it in clever places too. So like an info icon is really good because it's a common visual cue for people that use the internet. They're kind of used to seeing this kind of object and they naturally want to gravitate towards it. But you can hide it in a tooltip of even just like over your data specifically, or in like the titles of your different sections. Yeah, so collapsible containers are really cool. I'll be excited to dive more into the newer feature that we're going to cover in our next meeting, which is dynamic zones. And dynamic zones are meant to be a supplement to expanding and collapsing containers. Hopefully I have some interesting new ways to show you guys how you can arrange and hide things on the page and only make them visible when your users want them next month. All right. Any other questions? I think, did we answer all of them? I'm not sure if I missed any. Cool. Cade, if you are still around on the call, I'm not sure, and you want to email me, I will send you the eyeball objects that I use for for my dashboards. I just have them on a different laptop. All right, yeah, and that pretty much wraps up our discussion for this month. I hope you guys find this insightful and helpful. And of course, if you have questions or you want to talk about it further, feel free to message me or Kent or Matt. And yeah, we'll catch you guys next time. I'll hang around for a little bit in the event that anyone wants to chat or otherwise, but hey, thanks for coming out. Barrett's got a question. What are some ways people exchange information with clients not on a secure database? Oh, yeah. I got an email about this before. Barrett, that wasn't you, was it? Have we been emailing? Can't remember. It was. Barrett, you and I have discussed this. Yeah, so you know what? It's when you asked me that question. So for context for everyone, Barrett messaged me and he had a data flow that was operating off of Google Sheets, and then Tableau moved away from allowing connection directly to Google Sheets. You actually had to connect to Google Drive. And from what Barrett explained to me, what he was experiencing was that he was unable to set his refreshes on an automatic to kick off from the server, because his server will not allow him to connect to Google Drive because of its security settings. So, Barrett, when you message me, I can actually see if I can pull that up right now. I actually set up the same thing on our reworks local server, and I'm able to successfully run them, right? So in the way that I described, right, I went and added my yeah, here it is, testing Google refresh. So one of these things is my screen, and I'm going to share it with you. So yeah, we have an internal Tableau server that we sometimes use for testing various things, and so I've got some stuff in here. We are on Tableau server version. I love that for me. Am I back? Okay, cool. We'll try to share my screen one more time. Zoom just like crashed for some reason. Okay. So yeah, we're using Tableau server 22.1. And let me get that chat back up so I can see. So anyway, what I explained was that you can come up here to the account settings. You can embed your credentials for a specific source. And then you can use those credentials to set up a data refresh or otherwise an extract refresh. So when I run this refresh, it completes successfully. So I can kick off this refresh to my data source, and I can say run now, and I can go check the jobs. It's pending. You can see the one that I did and it completed. We'll see if it works. In progress. This is from my reworks Google Drive. So when I did it, right, I went onto my site, I embedded my credentials, I connected to my Google Drive, I published this server, and I hit run. Yeah, absolutely. And it worked just fine.
Okay.
So
I'm looking at this and I'm trying to understand Barrett's situation. So I might need more specific from Barrett, but I would assume that either, are you an admin on this server right now?
So the error message that Barrett got back was that his Tableau server did not have OAuth. Right. So from my limited understanding of OAuth, that this is a layer of security around where your server exists. But I guess Barrett was trying to tell me that they're using Tableau Online.
So Tableau Online does have OAuth. However, for Google Drive, there is an additional step that for almost all data connections, especially ones that are either connecting through Bridge or connecting through another way, you have to whitelist the server. So I'm wondering if for Tableau Online, maybe you could reach out to your other Interworks buddies to confirm this, you have to whitelist the Google Drive in some way, whatever server it's coming from. That would be the first thing. And typically, if it's not whitelisted, it will produce an OAuth error. The next thing I would notice is he needs to enter in the credentials just like you were saying, because otherwise he won't be able to connect. And one frustration that I have with the current connection is that you have to use OAuth tokens. You can't use what are known as the sponsor account, the accounts that are service accounts.
Yeah,
where you
service accounts.
Make a account that's just for ingesting data, and yeah. But in the OAuth, if it requires the OAuth, can you show them again how you set up the OAuth?
Oh, how I embedded my credentials.
Yeah, because that is exactly what you need to do. You have to add your credentials here for
Mhm.
Google Drive and probably Google Analytics, depending on if your organization also uses Google Analytics. And when you authorize it, you need to make sure if it has extra boxes on there, you check those boxes. Because depending on how the Google Drive is set up, whether it's a corporate Google Drive or a not corporate Google Drive, there'll be a box. So if you'll go back to that sign-in screen and pause for a minute. Yeah, go past that. Stop right there. Right here in this, make sure you trust Tableau. There might be a drop down. If there's a drop down, you need to click the box that says yes, and that's the permission that it's missing. Okay? If you're using your InterWorks Google Drive on the back end for all accounts, they've automatically set up that permissioning. For default ones, those aren't always set up. Okay? So that's why you don't see it on your screen while he might see it on his.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for sharing what your experience with this, Michael. That's pretty helpful.
Yeah, we primarily connect things with R, and we're kind of like, it's been a struggle to connect things up with the Tableau cloud, and we're really waiting for them to finally just add the Tableau Online R.
Yeah, yeah.
Together, you know?
Well, big dreams, Michael. Big dreams.
Big dreams. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Barrett, if you continue to experience troubles, maybe I can connect you and Michael together, and you guys can dig in further. That's honestly my limit of knowledge on that specific subject. I'm gonna go ahead and close the call down, guys. Thanks for hanging out. This is super fun, and yeah, I hope you guys have a great weekend.